What will be the guarantee of this process? How can it be guaranteed? And what is the role of the international community in guaranteeing this process?
First of all, I would like to clarify some terminologies. People are talking about negotiations or calling the process as a peace process. So this process hasn't a name yet. And they are not negotiations. Because when you say negotiations, people will have understanding of other experienced processes like in Colombia, in the Philippines, etc. So it's a process in which Öcalan took the first step, taking initiative. Say, I am initiating a new process, which can lead to democratization of Turkey, which will then build the ground for that peace. So we need democratization first. Without democracy, there won't be peace. And democracy means solving, firstly, the priority and some primary problems of Turkey, which is the Kurdish problem as a central problem of Turkey. It has a history of a century. So all the problems of Turkey are resulted from this problem, because the constitution of Turkey, the character of anti-democratization of Turkey is based on the denial and also annihilation and genocide against the Kurds. So the other conflicts are resulted from this denial, because the constitution is built on the denial of the existence of one of the ancient people in this region. And freedom of expression, violation of international regulation regarding right to self-determination of other ethnic groups, etc., are following this denial policy of century. So, and Turkey, I don't think Turkey would be able to change immediately from 100 years acknowledge 100 years experience, because the whole structures of the state was built accordingly. So from today to tomorrow, they won't make this shift. So because it's a structural problem, the Kurdish problem in Turkey. The existence of the Kurds have been made to a structural problem in Turkey. So and the question here is now how to push Turkey. So there are two main actors. One are the Kurds. So as I said, Öcalan and the PKK have been fighting heroically in the last 52 years. So now the Kurds are visible and Turkey has to touch this problem. Secondly, Turkey have seen that the states who have been fighting against the Kurds, like Iraq and Syria, the regimes failed, they collapsed. And Turkey have seen that in the changes of Middle East, where Iran became another center of attacks, that Iran have been losing much of their powers just since 2023. Iran is not a key player in the region anymore. The only one who want now which is insisting on the status quo is Turkey. So, but Öcalan says, listen, Turkey, you have two options. Whatever, you find a way to get a friendship with the Kurds, or the Kurds will have other options, since in the region there are a lot of regional and global players who are looking for new partners, and the Kurds can be the partners. So, so because Turkey hasn't decided yet, because they still do believe they can continue with the status quo which was created a century ago, what they do is delaying the solution, excluding third parties, seeking this problem as a domestic problem. But the reality was it is not a domestic problem, since Turkey was fighting also against the Kurds in Iraq, northern Iraq, in southern Kurdistan, in northern Syria, Rojava. So it's a regional problem. So Turkey made the Kurdish problem to a regional one. And the center of this problem is obviously Ankara. And Öcalan said, listen, if we solve this problem in Ankara, then it will also lead to softening of the whole area. Because one other ambition of Turkey was using the turmoil in Middle East for the ambition of neo-Ottomanism. So Kurds could prevent Turkey from their dream becoming the new Ottomans because the Kurds, when they defeated their settled areas in southern Kurdistan and Rojava, so they have also prevented Iraq and the state of Iraq and Syria to be occupied by Turkey. So this is a very important historical contribution of the Kurds in keeping the balance of the region, political balance. And I think, as I told before, excluding third parties, seeking the problem as a domestic one, are signals in which we become more concerned, skeptical about what is the real attitude of Turkey behind this. What should we do is, since the Kurds offered a lot, I mean, particularly Öcalan, and he said, well, I'm taking responsibility, but by saying he took risk, imagine in Middle East where it's an area full of conflict zones, conflicts, wars, exploitation, jihadist movements, proxies, it's full of chaos, so the region, and you gave up the arms. This is a very high risk. So, and if the PKK and Öcalan decided to take this risk because they knew that the international audience, the state wouldn't kept silence like in the past they did, because Turkey is also a challenge to them. So this offers the Kurds finding new partners. And I think the Kurdish policy has to be very active in this time. However, Turkey is rejecting third parties, but Turkey has obligation regarding the international agreements. Let's say Turkey is member of the Council of Europe. Turkey is member of the United Nations. Turkey is member of the NATO. Turkey is candidate for the membership of the European Union. So, and the United States Secretary General personally made a statement saying we are ready. So others are also ready to take over to help for the solution. And I think this is a good frame for the Kurds. However, Turkey is rejecting the third party, but the international obligations Turkey has regarding the signed agreements, this is the frame in which the Kurdish policy must act. However, Erdogan was threatening us a few days ago, say, hey, Kurds in the diaspora in Europe, be careful now, you have to make propaganda for Turkey's improvement in technology, etc. So I said his joke, it's a terrible joke. It's irony of history. He was calling us, the Kurds in Europe, not to harm Turkey's interests. Can you imagine? Without doing anything, without offering any hope for the future, for peace, but threatening us. So I understood Erdogan that he is continuing to act in his policy anti-Kurdishness, whatever in domestic policy or internationally. And that's why, and the last point would be, since the Kurdish problem is not just a creation of Turkey, but also of the European colonialism, so Europe is also responsible for the solution. So until now, they have been good friends with Turkey, but then there's a shift. So the partner became a problem, and the hostile, which have been the Kurds, to the ban of the PKK, etc., those are unexpectedly the real partners who are seeking political solution, not the war. So, and I think there's a need for a shift in the European mentality towards Kurds, particularly I would say Germany, United Kingdom, France, and even that couldn't help Turkey to overcome the Kurdish desire for freedom and right to self-determination. So now it's their turn to say, to decide for what they are really staying with, whether they will continue with support of militarism of Turkey, which will harm them, because Erdogan is acting also internationally, intervening in domestic problems in any country. So, and I think it's the right time to ask the Europeans to play a role. However, Turkey is not recognizing third parties, but international obligations, agreements, and also the offers made by the United Nations Secretary General, and we expect them to be more active. And the last one would be I'm not just focusing my perspective on the states, but I do believe since this is an area in which genocides are very easily, like we have seen 2009 in Sri Lanka with the Tamils, and then beforehand in Rwanda, and then in the 90s in Balkans, and then latest in Gaza. So the life and the existence of people are threatened now by globalization of capitalism. And I would say if the people really look for peace for Middle East, because Middle East is now center of global politics design, which they're going to create new, let's say, division of the societies without creating new borders. So it's also still focused on the US and other states, and it will harm the societies in the region, which will have its feedback also to the Western states. I do believe that the civil society organization, if they really want to solve the Palestinian issue, if they really want to help the peoples on the ground, the women, so they have a chance now to support the Kurdish strategy, the Öcalan's and PKK's strategy, to in the end to overcome one aggressive nation states in the region, since Turkey is very weak. So this is a good opportunity for the peace-loving people, organizations who are criticizing militarism, wars. So they should, if they can't mobilize for that. But what they can do is staying with the Kurds, offering much more support by criticizing their own governments in their bilateral or bilateral relations with Turkey, stopping their countries and governments by selling arms to Turkey, asking the Council of Europe, where many of their citizens of the states were members of the Council of Europe or European Union, or a single citizen or organized people can pressure through the governments to rethink their attitude towards Kurds. So from the grassroots, I think there's also, particularly from the grassroots, I would say we need a support, because I do believe that Öcalan is not just trying to find ways for the survival of the Kurds, because he was offering also solutions for the solution of the women's question, not just in Middle East and Kurdistan, but also globally, to solve the problem around ecology, and also overcoming the forms of nationalism by democratic transformation of Turkey. I think if the Kurds would get support also from the grassroots democratic progressive forces in Europe, I think then peace can become visible through Kurdistan to Middle East.
Yes, thanks a lot. And as Nilüfer has also outlined, the Kurdish question now is not only confined to Turkey, but is a way bigger question. And the ongoing process and the decision of the PKK to dissolve itself and to end its armed struggle will also have an impact on the other parts of Kurdistan. So now I will ask Kamal, the dissolution of the PKK and the end of the armed struggle, what kind of impact will it have on the Kurdistan region of Iraq, and especially on the political landscape in the Kurdistan region of Iraq? So especially the two main parties in Iraqi Kurdistan, the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan and also the Kurdistan Democratic Party. What kind of impact will the dissolution of the PKK have?
Yeah, so the dissolution of the PKK has a huge influence not only on the part of Kurdistan of Turkey, but also other parts of Kurdistan, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. It will have also a huge impact on the stability of the region. The Middle East, not only the Middle East, even because if there will be no war in the region, there will be no, for example, influx of refugees to Europe. And also there will be better opportunities in terms of economy, investment, etc., etc. This is one side. And also, it will also have an impact of the Kurdish-Turkish coexistence, not only within Turkey, but also in Europe, because in Germany there are, I don't know, I think 4 million Turks and Kurds are living in Germany. And this population, they have brought the conflict from their home country to Germany. And if we have peace process successful and the dissolution of the PKK will be impacting the peace, not only, as I said, in Turkey, but also in the parts of Kurdistan, and also the region, and also Europe. And to reply your question, and I also want to break down the impact of the PKK dissolution on the other parts of Kurdistan. So the Turkish army has over 30 military bases in Kurdistan region of Iraq, and they have occupied swath of land in the Iraqi territories in the Duhok and Erbil areas. And then in all the incursions of Turkey have been under the excuse of fighting the PKK. And the dissolution of the PKK means the Turkish army should withdraw from Iraq and also withdraw from other parts of Iraq, because also Turkey has a military base in the Mosul area. And the withdrawal of Turkey from Iraqi territories will be interpreted, will mean that the region will be more stable, and also the cooperation between the Iraqi government and also Kurdish government will be better, because right now the Turkish government has turned the KRG, or the KDP more particularly, into a proxy government or into a proxy political party. This is why one of the, of course, you have read the statement of the PKK, the dissolution statement clearly said that this extraordinary Congress was held under the embargo of the KDP. So, KDP has become also part of the conflict between the Kurds of Turkey and also the Turkish government, the Turkish state. That means that the dissolution of the PKK then will bring more peace between the Kurdish political parties themselves. Because until recently, we have been talking about another, hopefully not, civil war between the KDP and PKK, because KDP has been politically, financially, militarily supporting the Turkish occupation of the Kurdistan regional government areas. This is first. And secondly, we know that the dissolution of the PKK will be interpreted within the Kurdish population into how to embrace the ideas of the PKK that have been more progressive ideas. Because, as you know, the Kurdish politics have been almost divided like all the politics, national politics around the world, progressive and more conservative. So the PKK side for me is more progressive, and that will help the progressivists in Kurdistan region of Iraq to embrace those ideas. And I think there will be more cooperation between transnational, these transborders between the Kurdish populations. This is on one side. On the other side, in Syria, this also will have a huge impact, because one of the red lines of the PKK or 2015 peace process, which collapsed, was that Rojava or Syria was a red line for the PKK or for Öcalan. And I think Rojava will remain a red line, because the conflict, the conflict in Turkey should not has anything with the conflict in other parts of Kurdistan, because the Rojava question is a Syrian question, is not a Turkish question. Turkey is an occupier in Syria that they should, because now they have occupied Syria. Of course, we understand that Turkish state has been established on the denial of not only the Kurds in Turkey, but also Kurds everywhere. So the occupation of Syria of Syrian territories has been under the excuse of that there is the PKK Kurds in Turkey, in Syria. That means Turkey should also withdraw from Syria and also should help, because in fact, if the peace process, or if the peace will be in Turkey, it will be very good for Turkey as a state to have the Kurds in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran to be their ally. to help the Turkish government and Turkish peoples to cooperate in the region to establish more peace, because Turkey should change its colonial neo-Ottoman mentality into a friendly democratic government or state, as Öcalan wants to expand not its colonial interests, but rather, like any other countries, to establish cultural and economic and political ties with the region. And for Turkey, if the Kurdish question will be resolved, the best asset for them to achieve their economic interests in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, will be to have a better cooperation with the Kurdish population, and in Iran as well. If the Kurdish question will be resolved it will be inevitable for Iran to remain to delay the resolution of the Kurdish question. So the Kurdish question, if it will be resolved in Turkey, Iran should also follow suit. Iran will not be able to survive in a region where all the countries have resolved the Kurdish question, but only Iran to remain this dictatorial regime that is denying the political Kurdish rights. So what I want to say is the dissolution of the PKK from an armed struggle into a political, democratic, social struggle will help the other Kurdish parties in terms of their progressive ideology on one side, and also on the other side to resolve the Kurdish question in these areas. And I think this will help these nations, Kurds, Arabs, Persians, all the nations of the region to cooperate more, because I think the Middle East have had enough of violence, have had enough of discrimination, and I think the dissolution of the PKK, like the PKK response to Öcalan's call for peace and initiating this peace process, if it will be successful, I believe it will help not only Turkey and Kurdistan in Turkey, but also other parts of Kurdistan and also the entire region, even Europe, to be more stabilized.